In conclusion of critical thinking, analysis of materials to combat climate change, we look at some specific applications in Canada, building codes, standards, and mandates, and some immediate actions we could take to begin this process.
Here's a place where the government of Canada actually is doing something, and it's meaningful, and they should be publicizing it more. We're looking at a $1.8 billion project occurring now in Hamilton that's being heavily subsidized by the Ontario provincial government and the federal government to convert a steel mill from using coking coal to using natural gas. Because you can use natural gas in the process and you'll reduce the emissions of carbon in the process of making molten iron for steel by about 50%.
Huge.
This is not a bad thing. And if this is done globally through whatever initiatives are required, then again, we're still making the steel. It's still cheap. The natural gas is cheap compared to coking coal. And other hydrocarbon sources are still cheap compared to coking coal. We can make a 10 or 12% global difference in that one industry alone in carbon output. The other thing that I believe governments should be doing globally, and we're not doing enough of it in Canada, is stop building the cardboard buildings that we build. These energy inefficient, ugly little structures that we're into building. Mandate the passive standard, and not only mandate the passive housing standard that's used in Europe, also mandate that every one of these homes needs a solar hot water heating system put on the roof. Rugged individualists in the US, what's wrong with building a house that's off grid? Because that's what this is. It requires a tiny bit of electricity coming in from the outside to operate a heat pump, just in case. Otherwise, it's passively heated and it's so insulated that on a hot day, the temperature doesn't really change inside. And if you've got your hot water heater on the roof, your solar hot water system, a little bit of electricity just in case the hot water gets cold, because it's cloudy for 3 days, good, you're good to go.
Yeah.
It's a less energy emitting, it's a less energy intensive, less carbon emitting home. And there's no reason why there shouldn't be, in Canada at least, a federal building code that says at least this standard.
Yes, because with new technologies, often say with graphene, from the finding of it and a breakthrough, it could take 10 years before even before any dream of a consumer applicable product. So that doesn't mean
I was cleaning out my mother's basement a while back, and I came across a 1982, a copy from, I think it was 1982, of Scientific American that I bought as a kid. And it talked about the big breakthroughs that had recently happened in fusion research.
Oh, yes.
And how within a decade we were going to have nuclear fusion ready to go. It's 40 years ago. Yeah, we're still trying. We're still pitching. We can't wait necessarily for new technologies.
Yeah.
And things like a passive home standard, a passive, building standard that reduce energy consumption dramatically. We can do that today with existing technology. There's nothing to wait for. And homes, buildings in general, are big consumers of energy. So again, globally, you could drop energy consumption, and you can drop carbon emissions by probably 5 to 10% over time, but we have to start soon.
Yes.
When you tally up those areas, you're talking about 30 to 40% reductions in carbon that aren't going to disrupt our society. They aren't going to destroy anything.
Well, it gets rid of that narrative of fossil fuels, they're not great, we're going to get off them, but just bad, stop using. It's no, let's transition.
I can't.
Yeah, it's not realistic. Let's transition, and step by step, we're going to get there, and we're decreasing that number, and get excited that you can watch it every year drop down and go, we're making a difference. And hopefully your equity portfolio is going up a little bit too, because we're making some smart investments.
Absolutely.
And whether that's also sequestering carbon into concrete, which they can do, and saying, great, that's the new code. We're using this type of cement. Boom, end of story.
Look, it's not. I'll give you an example, Andrew. It's not a perfect solution, and it's a sample size of one, me. So your mileage may vary.
Yeah,
literally here, but I drive a plug-in hybrid. It replaced an internal combustion model made by the same company. Lifetime, my fuel consumption with the old internal combustion model was about 11 liters per 100 kilometers. A lot of city driving, some highway, but enough city driving that the higher level of gas consumption in the city moved the needle significantly higher than it might otherwise be. 11. Over the course of our first 3 or 4 fill-ups in the plug-in hybrid, and that means like 4 or 5 months, because we were doing most of our driving in the city in short bursts, so the battery took the brunt of it. My measured fuel economy was 1.6 liters per 100 kilometers.
Huge. Yeah.
So I took 80+% of carbon emissions out of the air from my driving, because I had a battery in my vehicle, and it's not a 80 kilowatt hour battery. It's not $100,000 vehicle.
No.
It didn't cost me more than buying the new internal combustion version would have cost, but it is dramatically reduced my carbon emissions while commuting. And that's bad. Why? And it's something we could mandate and do starting in relatively short order if a government actually sat back and planned how many of these vehicles can actually be made given the supply of critical materials we have. Yes. And what do we need to do to grow that supply of critical materials so we can mandate even larger levels of sales and proportions of sales in years to come.
And maybe to wrap this up, because we are blessed, much like Australia, we are a resource country. We have an amazing resource at our doorstep in our backyard. We have an opportunity, a chance to literally be a world leader. Can you maybe speak to the decades of, and we'll call it ESG, that I've heard lawyers say Canada's already been doing the ESG thing for decades anyway. This is going to, to some degree, it's not going to be a big change for those miners to adapt to any ESG kind of ruling. Can you speak to the narrative of mining bad, it's deplorable, it's terrible, to let's look at this realistically. We can do this in an environmentally friendly way. And we can, not only do you want to have it in your backyard so you have a say, you don't want it, say, off and shine in the middle of nowhere where you don't get to say, it's not your project, where you get a say and you have some confidence that they're going to be held accountable. There's going to be a bond to clean up at the end, whatever the state may be. Just to give people that are listening that say, all right, I get it. You've got me one over, but we're still talking mining here. Mining's evil. It's terrible. It's bad. We do it. It's awful. This maybe speak to that kind of last argument someone might have.
Yeah. And you know what? And I understand the mentality around it. And if somebody told me that I needed to live within like 500 meters of a brand new open pit mine, from a noise point of view, from a disruption point of view, I'd understand why anybody would be negative about it, because I wouldn't want to live near that new open pit mine either. But the thing that we need to understand is, I think there's a nuance to add to that. I'll try and do that at the end. I mean, mines are in the broad scheme of things, when properly managed and when properly dealt with from an environmentally point of view, they are minimally disruptive. I visited open pit mines that have been decommissioned, and they've turned into lush areas with some very odd terrain from place to place, and probably a big pond, at the bottom of a depression that looks for all the world like it must have been created by an impact, from some asteroid. Yeah. In times gone by, when in actuality it's just a partly filled in open pit mine. And they look perfectly tractable. There's no real environmental difference. If you visit some of the uranium mines in Kazakhstan that have been decommissioned, they're in situ uranium mines. There is absolutely nothing visible to tell you on surface, and there are no readings that you will take, radio activity related or otherwise, to tell you that there was ever a mining project anywhere nearby. And that's a couple or 3 years after decommissioning. Mining is minimally invasive surgery for our society. It's a necessary process to creating a better world. Yes, it is environmentally damaging in one small area. Let's pick the right spots to do that damaging. And that's part of the process of getting permits issued, part of the process of getting things done. But I want to go one step beyond that. And you're absolutely right again, Andrew, in that ESG, not by name, was a necessary focus for Canadian miners, especially in Canada, for generations, because to a large measure, you were in remote areas. These areas happened to be native-owned land, native-titled land, and you needed to get community buy-in to be able to establish a mine there. So you needed to make the necessary trade-offs with those communities. You got your social acceptance by virtue of having to go in and win it.
Yeah.
You were forced into environmental compliance by virtue of the fact that we have some very stringent mining regulations in Canada that limit the amount of waste that can be emitted in any form. So the E and S parts are covered. The G, well, we can argue whether, Canadian mining companies have good governance or not, but I mean, at least they're trying.
Yeah.
But I think beyond that, I'd love to see the government step in and basically understand that if we can come up in Canada, little bitty Canada, 1.5% of global carbon emissions, even if we took it to zero, we're not moving the needle at all. We're not going to move that meter in any meaningful way with respect to solving climate change as a problem. But if we can come in and come up with solutions that not only benefit Canada, not only require and are likely to require additional mined material, which is going to mean more jobs and economic growth for Canadians, but if we can come up with solutions that depend on those critical materials efficiently, wisely, cost effectively, and export those solutions, we're going to have a ton more economic growth that results from Canada being not just a world leader in mining, not just a world leader in critical materials mining, but a world leader in climate mitigation technologies and products. And that's worth an awful lot more than some virtue signaling that, hey, we achieved net zero carbon for 13 minutes one day last month.
Well, Jon, I really want to thank you for this, for spending the time with us and walking us through how important this is, some of the optimism, some of the changes that we need to face. I know you work with individuals, clients, institutions.
Yes.
Like I said before, you've spoken at pretty much any critical metals convention or conference out there. We've put up your contact information as well for someone to reach out to you. But for you to kind of take the time to walk us through this, I think it's such a crucial point because we're starting to see the governments acknowledge it. We're starting to see plans coming together. And I think if we can tell that story in a way that people want to hear and can hear, that's maybe not as technical from someone who's very technical like yourself, I think that gives a lot of reassurance. And also it incentivizes people to go, listen, the way I look at it, the capital markets can do and the free markets can do wonderful things if people are incentivized. And if you are an activist investor or person, don't glue your hands on some artwork. Throw $500 at a company that's developing something. Throw $1,000 at a uranium miner deposit. Throw your $1,000 or call Jon and ask, listen, how can I better use my energy, my personal energy, to have a positive impact rather than, oh, I'm making noise and I'm getting the cause out there. Everyone knows the problem. We know the problem. So
we know there's a problem.
Let's focus everyone in Canada to get them on board with the solution.
And I firmly believe that we can take 40 to 50% of carbon emissions out of the air and grow our economies, turn this into a better world and have better economic opportunities for everybody moving forward. It's not a zero-sum game. We don't need to say we're going to take carbon emissions down, so we'll shut the economy down as a consequence. That's not the right way to think about this. And it isn't going to happen because enough people are going to disagree with that approach to make it impossible.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Jon. I really appreciate it. And we'll check back with you again soon.
Thanks, Andrew. Enjoyed it. Take care.